Hello everybody, this is Scott Killaby. I think I'm probably going to trigger some people with this video. And I used to be a real people pleaser. And the idea of getting on a video and saying some of the things that I might say today would have been absolutely off limits to me. I didn't know it, but there was still a part of me that was hooked into not saying anything that might rock the boat, which was coming from repression. Because the idea is I rock the boat, that I won't be able to get on here and share this message that I love to share so much and work with people. There comes a point in one's life, let's hope, it's what's happened for me, is that when you spend your life's work and what I've done here as a teacher or whatever I've done, you sit and you look back and you go in a sort of reverse engineering and you say, what has this all been about? What is it that we're really doing here? And is there anything that I've really, really learned here that should give me any cause for alarm? And this is what I've been doing in the last, so I left teaching for 5 years, essentially left for 5 years. I don't know if you noticed that. Maybe you didn't. And it's because that was what you would say a soul searching period. I opened up treatment centers, so I've been in the clinical field. So here as a teacher, I wrote, like six books, 7 actually, first, just about the nature of my realization and helping people with the recognition of this realization. That's what I was doing. And then I went to the clinical field. When I was in the clinical field and when I was starting owning and operating mental or addiction treatment, mental health centers, I stepped back from teaching. Not just because I wanted to explore the mental health addiction side of things, but because there were definitely things that I saw in the non-duality scene that I could not articulate back then, that did not feel, it felt off. And again, I didn't have the words for it. And without having the words for it, and with also being in repression myself, I couldn't speak it, couldn't say it. So I needed to go on a sabbatical, really, and go out into the world, and get in the trenches with people who are really suffering. Like in treatment centers, you deal with like high level crisis, like, right on the verge of overdose or suicidal ideation, just right on the brink of suicide, or some mental health issue, mental illness, whatever, brain difference that creates a crisis event in someone's life. Like that's what I've been dealing with. Not just that aspect of life where many of us sit very privileged in a way, and we have our meditation practices, and nothing really challenges us, or we have challenges, but not like that. So I've been with people who have real challenges, and sometimes health challenges, like that are pain, illness, that contribute to the challenging mental health issues. So I've been in a different world. And while I was in that world, I kind of left the spiritual world behind. And what I did, though, is I didn't leave my own inquiry practice behind, because I've always known inquiry to be this tool that opens me up to recognize unconsciousness that I can't see. It's always provided a deeper level of freedom. So I kept it with me. And then fast forward a little bit, and Dan McClintock, co-developer of the Killaby Inquiries, which is the work that we do now, came into my life. We developed the work. I have already told you this story and about what happened with me. As I started to slowly come back to the teaching, I was also doing a lot of inquiry on my own on anger repression as a result of a chronic pain condition, a very serious spinal condition. And I want to say just a little bit about that, because all of this is relevant to what I'm going to say. I think what I'm going to say needs this context, frankly, because I can't just say what I'm going to say without you hearing my experience here. I'd already worked with thousands and thousands of people, and I was already left teaching because there was something that I didn't see. It was also something within myself, but it was something I was seeing in the other teachings. I left. So when I started to come back, I was again doing anger repression work, because I started to learn that anger repression was one of my issues, and that's why I had this illness. And the science was confirming that emotional repression is often behind illness. Dr. Gabor Mate just did a post. I posted on my Facebook page. Many of you respect him. He says essentially emotional suppression, repression, although it's a childhood survival mechanism, in adulthood, it leads to physiological illness. So I had to learn it the hard way. I didn't see any Dr. Gabor Mate quotes out there in 2012 or whatever. Our work became trauma informed through the years. It didn't become repression informed. And so now this work is repression informed, but I had to learn the hard way. So backtrack. Before the Killaby inquiries really were known, before people like Gabor Mate would say things like that, 2016, that stuff wasn't being talked about much, repression that much, and enlightenment, presence teachings. So it was nowhere on the radar. And then I just developed this chronic spine pain, which at some point, as I've said, at a few points, led to me wanting to kill myself. And it wasn't even really depression. It was when you have pain that intense, like at one point where it was debilitating, I couldn't move. I literally couldn't move my body. I couldn't move my head because it was a nervous system, spinal cord injury. I couldn't move my head. Like, I couldn't talk. I couldn't pick up the phone. I was just barely conscious. And another time, I just wanted you to know that this wasn't just an ache. Like, this was a serious disease, condition. Another time I was on my couch in the RV. It was like having a blowtorch in my mid-spine. Like, almost like that. A blowtorch that wouldn't turn off. And you can imagine, just rest with that? Come on, guys. You don't rest with a blowtorch in your spine. You do, but your body is like, I was writhing and moving and twisting and like wanting to die. So all the existential issues that come up with death all came up for me. You know, it all comes up. That's just what we have to deal with at that. But that's not really what this is about, because anybody facing death feels that. No, what happened is that I came out of that. So the condition that I had has gone from, and this is all part of the context, the condition that I had was a major obstruction in my spine, throttling my spine like this, like a vice, and bones protruding into it. At least one bone spur protruding right into it. Other bone spurs are there. Bulged disc. Serious issues going on there. Enough to cause me to be debilitated at times and in living hell, really, on a physical, so-called physical level. Now, what does this have to do with anything? Now, hear me out here, because this is where it all comes into play, and for clarity for me. As I've said before, I thought that was physical, and I was getting no healing, okay? None from Western medicine. And what I say to people is, do not hear what I just said as don't go to the doctor, because that's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that in my experience, some of the best surgeons in Southern California failed me. They didn't have the answer. They were too afraid to. I went to surgery. It didn't work. I had what you call failed back syndrome, which is literally a diagnosis for people who go to surgery on the back and it fails. I had practically a nationally renowned surgeon refused to do a second surgery on me because of where the injury is located close to my heart and my lungs. By the way, that surgeon was then murdered by one of his patients who also felt deep frustration from not being able to heal a spinal condition, walked into the office with this doctor and killed this doctor. There's so much stress and pain and fear involved with illness and chronic pain. If you've never been there or been at the end of your life, or you can't know it. You can't know what that's like. And I actually understood the pain of the person who killed the surgeon. Of course, I would never do that. But I understood and felt the pain of that because I have felt that desperation. I have felt that. And so now I'm not feeling that. So what started as my doctors were telling me, you're going to have this for the rest of your life. It's not going to get better. It doesn't get better. You're lucky if it doesn't get worse. That's what I was told. And so the Western medicine completely failed me. Doesn't mean it's going to fail you, but it completely failed me. It did not know what was going on here. Could not do it. The most that they could do would be medical devices or implants or medications. Part of the suicidal ideation is I didn't want to be on drugs for the rest of my life. So I was just like, I'm just going to end it so I don't have to be on painkillers. The point is that I had to extricate myself from the thinking of Western medicine while still going to the doctor just to make sure that nothing is, really messed up there. I had to extricate myself from that conditioning and start listening to other people. I started turning towards John Sarno, Dr. John Sarno. He, in his work, opened me up to the mind-body connection as it applies to chronic pain. He was finding in his practice that the medical community had it wrong, that many of these chronic pain situations are actually from emotional repression, anger, fear, repression. He had a very high success rate with his patients, higher than his colleagues. And that's actually been verified. People have gone into Sarno's files and seen this. He was on something. I knew it when I read it, but I didn't know what the methodology was, and he didn't seem to offer one. So I used the KIR inquiries, and I developed them and targeted them towards my own anger repression after reading what he was saying. And then now this methodology is now working on repression. What happened for me then is that not only did the nerve pain go away, completely went away from inquiry on anger repression and other repressions, nothing to do with medical treatments or medication. The only medication that really, really helped was ketamine in terms of healing. And what ketamine did is it simply helped me become more somatically aware. It was the tools that brought up the anger repression commands, which you hear me talking about. Now, I'm saying all this because I want you to hear that it comes from real experience. It's not Scott Kilby speculating. It's not just theory. I'm watching now the experience of people that I've worked with for years unfold over time. I'm watching my own experience. And my experience in terms of my spine pain is really relevant because, again, as I did anger repression work and other work, their pain gone. Not only did the pain leave, but the obstruction itself that used to extend like from the mid-spine, it felt very physical, almost into my face, is gone. And then what was left was a pinch in my spine, and then even the work went into that and changed that. So almost like the physical structure of it. And it's from acceptance and repression work, inquiry. But this is not why I'm here. I'm not here to promote on this video these inquiries. I'm here to tell you this. I think your house may be on fire. Not all of you. Not all of you. Because some of you chose teachers, by the way, the really good ones aren't very popular. That's what I've noticed. The really good non-dual teachers are not very popular. But many of you are following some popular teachers who are not trauma-informed, not repression-informed. Now, does that matter? Absolutely. Well, maybe not absolutely, but yes, it matters. Why does that matter? Let me try to explain this for a second. Here's where I really want you to listen when I say your house is on fire. You really have to use your mind here. This is not just rest as awareness. I want you to use your mind. I want you to think about this. I want you to use your intellectual mind and really think about what I'm saying here. When we repress emotion, science tells us that we do it unconsciously. So I'm not talking about the situation where you're afraid and you know that you just want to shove fear down. You're actually aware of it, or anger. No, this repression is a mechanism that happens under the radar, And it goes on, and it starts in childhood around some scary event or relationship or painful thing, and it continues continuously, but unconsciously in our personality our whole life. Okay, and essentially everyone represses something because we live in an unconscious human species, right? So if you had parents, you had unconscious parents. Probably, right? Most likely. With unconscious parents, you cannot feel and express all emotion because they're unconscious. If they were awake, they would understand their own, they would see and allow their own emotional system. I almost said immune system because emotional system and immune system are actually mirroring each other. But here I'm talking about the emotional system. So if you had parents, you had unconscious parents, which meant that you weren't able to express every emotion. Because whatever emotion was not, which was repressed in your parents, may have influenced the repression in you. Whatever was allowed by them was, of course, impacting you or not allowed. So we grow up as, let's just say, not only unconscious, but repressed. Traumatized, of sure, because of things that happened, yes. But also, science says that in addition to the trauma, there's repression. So basically, growing up human, you're repressed emotionally. It may not be anger repression. It could be that you repress sadness because you don't want to appear weak, or fear. Or it could be that you repress love or joy, or your sexuality or sexual orientation, gender expression. You might repress your doubt, your intuition. Whatever is naturally occurring for humans can easily be repressed. So, but it's all, and that's all being done before you get to non-duality. Okay? So this is a mechanism that's going on, completely under the radar as a survival mechanism in relationship. And then what I'm saying then is that the repression itself, because we don't feel fully ourselves when we're repressing, is driving us, at least in part, and I would say quite a bit, towards self-improvement and enlightenment. Now, that's fine, because the search for awakening is a noble pursuit. So if the suffering brings us to that, that's what it does, doesn't it? It brings us to the desire to know our true nature when we're suffering. So the fact that, that emotional repression is driving us on the path, first of all, shouldn't be a surprise to you. And it's not a big deal, really. But here we are coming to a path that, at least either explicitly or implicitly, claims to be kind of the Holy Grail and like a complete teaching. Like the idea is that what I'm pointing to here is the absolute reality. So there's nothing beyond what I'm pointing to that you need to even concern yourself with. Because I see the nature of reality. I've recognized it. I'm the teacher or whatever. So the signal that can send, if there's a lifetime of repressing, is first of all, that if the repression is still going on while I'm at the teaching, which there's no reason to assume that it wouldn't be going on still, see? Because it just goes on continuously. So then you come to the teaching and you hear this teacher is talking about the nature of reality. The teaching is being communicated in a way, and I used to do this, so I know that it's like, well, no, everything arises to awareness. So you don't really need to go to therapy. You can, but everything arises to awareness. So just see what you are and see what you're not. Wake up, and then all will be well, and whatever issue you're dealing with, that'll resolve itself because it's not you. Sounds good. Sounds really good, actually. It is not. It is not what it appears to be. And this is the problem. Notoriously, see, in the clinical field, when a therapist can't help somebody, they refer out. That's what they do. In the non-dual field, you don't necessarily see that. You might be kicked out of a community. You might be said by a teacher, I can't work with you. But referring out to help somebody is not something that happens. So what happens is that people stay in. So if a teaching is not addressing a repression, for example, that someone brought, If the teaching isn't designed or the practices aren't designed to even get to repression, and the teaching is saying this is the nature of reality, I've got it all here for you. Just recognize your true nature and you'll see it. If that doesn't reach the repression, then you're trapped there, because in addition, sometimes when we're seeking, we might look up to the teacher as giving us the love or putting off the love that we didn't get from our parents. So then we might be even more drawn to that teacher because they're emanating this love, whatever this is. And if the teacher is giving us a teaching or a pointing that doesn't include this issue over here, whether it be trauma or repression or addiction, then we're trapped there in this surrogate parent relationship. And also, if the teacher represses the same emotions that we repress, we're going to be drawn to that teacher as a way to bypass that. So there are these elements that are pulling us towards the teacher and keeping us there. And then the teaching is saying it's a complete teaching in one way or another, even implicitly. And then so therefore, if it doesn't target trauma and repression continue. And that, my friends, is a problem. Let me tell you why that's a problem. 10 years ago, we didn't know that trauma and repression are behind a lot of mental and physical health issues. We just didn't know it. Maybe you say 15 years ago. We know it now. We know it. Science knows it. Dr. Gabor Mate just shared it. It is not a secret anymore. I've listed the studies. So I feel like at this point we have to pay attention to the subject. Like, just because for a couple of 100 years or more, maybe thousands, we've been doing this meditation, mindfulness, awakening thing without understanding trauma and repression, without even dealing with it, really. We can't do that anymore because of what we know. You don't want to just completely just throw away science as you wake up. Transcend and include. That's just part of science. Is just part of the relative world. They're helping us. It's not perfect. It's not absolute truth, but they're helping us understand our human experience. And if we'll listen to science and really with a critical eye, we can actually shift our practices and what we're saying to make sure that what we're saying is not really woo-woo or just not evidence-based or damaging, potentially damaging. I want you to see this picture forming, okay? Now just remember that everyone's repressed because we have unconscious parents, period. And when I give the test, I have a repression test. When I give it to people, teachers, anyone, students, facilitators, trainees, many of them say, either I don't repress, or if I repress, it's just a little bit. And everyone represses. When they take the test, they realize that repression hides. So your conscious mind is not going to be awake to this. In fact, the conscious mind, or the mind that you're aware of, is going to say things like that. It's going to say things like, I'm not repressing, because that's part of the mechanism of actually blinding yourself to this mechanism of repression in your speech, in your thinking, and in your emotional somatic body. It's hiding. So you have to be really discerning on this particular issue of trauma and repression as you go into, I think, that's my perspective, as you come into non-duality and enlightenment teachings. It's really important, I think, now, because of the information and the insights that we have, research, the literature, science, the direct experience with people through the years, like direct experience, that now we have to pay attention to this. And that if we don't, there may be dire consequences. And I'm not being alarmist. I am the living example of the dire consequence. As I said, I missed my anger repression for the very same reason that many of you are missing your repressions in non-duality. And here's how it happens again. I want to just listen to this. You're already repressing when you come here. It's already happening under the radar. It's not something that you're awake to, and it's not something that you can just be awake to by recognizing your true nature as awareness. You cannot be awake to repressions because the system is designed to fully hide it within your somatic body, fully hide it from you. And this is how it continues and continues to protect you, by being fully hidden. If it were just something that you could just discover, it wouldn't work, because it's unconscious. It has to operate whether you know it or not. It's protecting you. Okay, so knowing that now, some people will say, well, if I recognize my true nature, then I see reality as it is. How possibly could a repression sneak under that? My answer is because it's repression. It's repression. This is not a presence issue, or it's in some ways you could say it's not even an ego issue. It is a body issue. It is a cellular memory. Some people use that term. It's held in your body. The issue is in your tissues, as they say, and hidden. So we bring the repressions to the teachings. We're already doing it unconsciously. We're already pushing, shoving down emotion unconsciously. It's already happening. So then we listen to the teacher, who, by the way, is not, if they're not aware of their own repressions and have lifted them, they may be speaking to us in a way that is repressive, further strengthening our repression. That's a big issue. But the other thing is how we're interpreting the teaching. So even if the teacher's somehow being clear about our emotional experience and saying, because even some teachings don't even talk about the body, which is a problem in and of itself, because that's where we're storing all of this. But so the teacher says things like, okay, just let the feeling be as it is. It's not you. It's appearing to awareness. Got anger? Let anger just be. Can you be the space for that? Whatever the pointer is. But here's the problem. If my system is already repressing as a mechanism, which it is, let's say it's repressing anger, for example, anger is not going to arise then in the way that the teacher is saying. The teacher is speaking as if it sounds like, oh, so everybody has full access to all these emotions, and so all we have to do is just allow them in awareness. But that's not how repression works. We don't each have access to the full access to these emotions. So when the teaching says, just allow the thoughts or allow the emotions, which by the way, they're connected. You allow one, you allow the other, in many cases. These emotions are not going to arise for you to see that they're not you if they're repressed. And it doesn't have to be anger repression. I know many people who repress sadness, for example. So, same thing. Teachers at the top saying, oh, some of you feel sadness. Can you allow your heart to just be broken? Like just dissolve into that, whatever the pointer is. My point is the person who's repressing sadness cannot possibly hear that pointer in the way it's intended, because the system is holding that emotion down. And these emotions that are being held down now are then concretizing into contraction for people. Stomach, and they already have been, actually. They've been, their whole life has been contracting. But the point is they come to the teaching, the contraction gets reinforced, or the pain, or the illness, or even the relationship issue connected to the repression, because it's the repression of the body is not being met, because it's hidden. And it can't be met by the pointers that exist out there, because the pointers that exist out there are pointing to what you are conscious of, what isn't repressed. Now, every now and then, a teacher may stumble upon a pointer or a way of helping somebody that gets to repression. But repression hides and is very powerful. I've lifted it. It's been lifted in my experience, except for just a little bit. It's such a powerful command to shut down and hold back, that meeting it just every now and then is not going to do it. That's my experience. Not going to do it. We're up against something that we have to now pay attention to. This is an animal. we have to really acknowledge and honor this animal of repression and trauma, these animals, and start respecting that and dealing with it instead of trying to bypass it. The reason is because of what science says. It's not just that we are in with these spiritual teachers and our bodies are continuing to remain contracted, or our pain is not being resolved, or illness, or whatever issue, it's not just that. It's that these things could lead to death, actually. There are studies that say that emotional repression is contributing to premature death, cancer. Like, this brings up the real existential issues for people. If you can understand that you could be actually in a teaching which is reinforcing a mechanism that is bad for your health, you would definitely realize your house is on fire. And you would be asking that teacher, tell me about this. Are you aware of what repression is? First of all, do you know that it runs under the radar? How is your teaching going to help me with that? And you need to ask those questions. And the same with trauma. I didn't ask the questions. There was nobody back then when I came to non-duality or in presence teachings that said anything like this, except for, I think it was Louise Hay. I always get the name wrong. There's some books out there that were pointing to the fact that the physical disease is often connected to emotional, mental stuff. But nobody was making the connection here, which is that the way that the pointings happen in non-duality can reinforce repression. And coming out of repression, I'm looking left and right. I'm like, holy shit, this is an institutionalized problem. It's an institutionalized repression at this point, and it's not being seen, and people are not noticing that their house is on fire. And I'm meeting with people, and have been for years, with chronic pain, just like me. In illness, I have worked with people at the end stage cancer, which I know now to have been at least partly caused, just like my cancer, from emotional repression, because I went into inquiry with those people and I saw that. But they didn't have time to deal with the lifetime repression. Some of them died from various diseases, which were not just necessarily caused by repression. Some of these things may have multi causes, like environment, diet, genetics. But here in the spiritual realm, I just don't think we can avoid the emotional piece of it, is my point. So, the thing you're going to have to kind of get over to hear this message is, one, the idea that you don't repress. And that's easy to get over, because all you have to do is go onto this YouTube channel, or my YouTube channel, and look for the video that says, are you repressing emotion? Take this test. And Scott Killaby, easy to find. Take that, and then once you see that you have repression, or if you do, then come back and watch this video, or start to watch some of the other videos on repression, because now you've already gotten over that threshold. Now you know that there's repression. And because in the other videos, I'm explaining how that works and how we work with it. And you're going to probably be interested in that. But there's a few other things you have to get over. And one is your loyalty to the notion that just resting as awareness, or be here now, or non-dual realization in and of itself is enough to kind of handle all the suffering that comes up. And it is not. That is what I have seen for the last 15 years. I've definitely seen that. It's definitely the case in my experience. This is why I developed inquiry. Exactly why. To get to the more unconscious stuff. So you might have to get over the hump of believing that just, again, resting as awareness, allowing everything to be, somehow is going to unearth repression. Because if you heard what I said about how repression works, you can't really think that anymore. Unless you deny the word repression or something. Like if you say, well, I understand what you're saying, it makes sense, but I don't think it's real. That's a standard non-dual thing, where it's not real is a way to dismiss something. If you dismiss something that has validity to it by saying it's not real, if that thing does have validity to it, then you could actually experience some negative effects from it, from dismissing it. And that's what I did. I dismissed this repression thing. I didn't know anything about it. I dismissed it, and It took me to chronic pain, debilitating pain at times. As I've said, I just want you to know where this took me. There was a time when I just couldn't move. I couldn't move my head. I couldn't really move my eyes. I couldn't move my body. I couldn't pick up the phone. Couldn't speak. There were times when I wanted to kill myself because I didn't have any options, because nobody explained any of this to me. It can get to a really dark place, guys, if we don't wake up to what we're not awake to. And I am not alone, because now I'm working with people who've been in non-duality for years, who have contracted bodies, painful bodies, and when we go into inquiry, guess what we find? Repression, trauma. That's what we're finding. And it is not a coincidence that there's both repression and trauma and health issues. Repression and trauma and chronic pain. Repression and trauma and mental health issues. Repression and trauma and personal relationship issues. Because science is saying repression and trauma is involved in all those things. So in our direct experience here in KI, we are confirming that. We are confirming that that's exactly what's going on. The link is right there. That is not to say, hear me out, I'm not saying, and this is where people mishear me, I'm not saying, I have to say it like that all disease is caused by emotional repression. I don't know that. But we have plenty of evidence to know now that many diseases are at least partly caused by it. We have plenty of evidence. I see it. It's not just the science, it's the people that I work with. It's my own experience. So I'm very, very, very confident about this, actually. Not in an arrogant way, just very confident. And I'm going to keep speaking about it. And you may have to get mad at me a little bit or get tired of me before you hear it. But when your house is on fire, the person that tells you in the end is the person that you're most grateful to. And no matter whether you like the way I say it or you like me or anything, at least hear me. Just hear it. You don't have to like me to hear this, for sure. And if you resonate with it, I'm asking you to send it to other people in the non-dual world who have this profile. Okay, just listen, this profile. They're in the non-dual teachings, but they have an issue that isn't being resolved. A physical health issue, chronic pain, illness, a body contraction, like energy held somewhere that isn't being dissolved. They're being told just rest with it. It's just going to go away somewhere. Nothing's happening with it. It's painful. Contraction. Personal relationship issues, lack of boundary setting, any number of relationship issues that are not really being resolved by the pointers or the process of awakening. Like there's real issues that aren't being resolved. Mental health issue that doesn't really get resolved. Traumas that don't get resolved. Addictions that either were happening before you got to non-duality and that continue, or that arise after you recognize awareness. This stuff happens, guys. A 3-year sex compulsion came up for me after realizing the awareness. 3 years of sex compulsion because of unresolved trauma and repression. And I am not the only one. For 15 years I've been watching this. Addiction is the little secret in non-duality in the sense that people don't really know what to do with it. This is why we created a new model of recovery, because it's a very difficult issue and people are hiding. But just for example, I work with a lady who, by the way, had cancer. This is years ago. There was definitely signs of emotional repression. She woke up. And as she woke up, she was already diagnosed with cancer. Massive, because she hadn't dealt with the trauma and the repression, the awakening led to a massive addiction to gambling. And it overtook her life. And she died, actually, not resolving the repression. She died from the cancer and was in the throes of addiction as she died. And that's just one person. So this addiction is very challenging to deal with. And And this idea that just recognizing true nature is going to end all your addictions is not how it's happening. It's not working out that way. And all of this to me points to a lack of embodiment. It's just one way of saying it. A lack of actually recognizing all the way down through the somatic experience what you've recognized initially, which is that there's no separation. Like the true seeing that there's no separation. The body still holds pockets of separation. The imprints of trauma and repression are so hidden to you. The way that I've been trying to explain it is like, this is why I have tattoos, I think. Someone mentioned this the other day. Tattoos are so close to the skin, they are the skin, that in a sense, if you close your eyes, like if I close my eyes, I can't see the tattoo, but it's there. See, it's still there. I can't see it. All I feel is sensation of arm sensations. I don't see tattoos, and yet I'm covered with them. And that's exactly how it is with trauma and repression. You could be resting as awareness and you just don't see these imprints, traumatic imprints, repression commands, things like hold back anger, hold back sadness. Don't say that. Or these kind of things, trauma commands like stop, don't, get off me, leave me alone, I'm not safe. These are very, very deeply hidden commands. They're like tattoos on your sensations. I don't know how else to say it. So like when you're resting as awareness, you can't see the tattoos. All you see is sensations. Now, people will say, just listen from awareness. But the tattoos, many of them don't show up because they're designed to be unconscious, to sort of like protect you. But then as you're an adult, it actually makes you suffer, right? With illness and whatever else. You're not seeing the tattoos when you're resting as awareness. I wasn't either. Every now and then with a skillful teacher or practitioner, you can start to pull up some of the tattoos because the teacher knows how to pull some of them up. That's what I was doing, some of them. Well, what I found with repression and trauma is these tattoos are like constant. They're repetitiously there. They're powerfully connected to the body. So pulling them up every now and then doesn't really do anything. Little shifts or whatever. But these tattoos, these commands to hold back, these trauma responses are continuous and very powerfully connected to the body. But they're like tattoos. You can't see them. Resting is awareness. So what we did, Dan and I, is we developed inquiries that prompt them up. And this is KI. And by being able to prompt these up, I learned how to prompt up the hidden commands for trauma and repression in my own experience. And by bringing those into awareness repeatedly, they dissolved. That brought about the healing. And it brought about monumental shifts in my relationships that can't even begin to, we'll talk about them. Really can't put words to it. My voice is now online. I feel strength and power. I feel empowered like never before. I don't care what other people think. I don't care if I don't become a popular teacher. I don't care. I feel like I know what I am. I know what I'm not. I'm not trying to be all transcendent, godlike guru. The awareness is there always. The human being, to me, is beautiful. I love the expression of humans, but I couldn't love that when I was repressed. And that's another thing, is that the repression can lead us into this sort of anti-self view that makes non-duality look very appealing. Because if I already don't like parts of myself that I've pushed away, and then someone says, well, that's not you anyway, the repression goes, really? I'm interested. Tell me more. And you get pulled right into pointings that show you that your ego isn't real, which is true pointings, good pointings. It's not they're just arisings. But then, because you have repression, the pointings get used in your own system to further repress those emotions. They're just ego. See that? And they stay down there. So they never arise. That's what happens. They never really, really fully arise. Your house is on fire. You may not see it right now. I'm standing in the yard and I'm looking at your house and I see the fire. The fact that you don't see it is why I'm standing in the yard. It's why I'm on videos all the time. I'm going to keep standing in the yard outside your house because I love you. You have no idea how much love and compassion this is coming from. If you think this is coming from like arrogance or money or whatever, you are severely mistaken. Because coming out of repression, my heart is so huge for all of you more than ever. The people that are earnestly suffering and want to be free. This is why I'm willing to take a chance. This is why I'm willing to take on other teachers. I'm not a savior. I just am not going to be quiet anymore. I'm going to stand in your yard, in your lawn, and I'm going to tell you your house is on fire. And I'm going to stand in the yard of teachers who are putting forth repressive teachings. And I'm not going to be an asshole, but I'm going to stand in their yard. And I'm going to say, your house is on fire. And because your house is on fire, the houses of the people that are following you are on fire. Because my house was on fire. I know what that's like. So I'm going to keep doing it. I may lose people. In the meantime, I've already lost people. But there comes a time when you're willing to go that far. You're willing to lose everything or everyone if you know in your heart that what you're doing is coming from love and compassion and clarity. And that's what this is coming from. Even if there are some shadows here, and I'm sure there are, there's something here that I can't see yet, that doesn't change the fact of what I've seen. So I'm going to keep talking about it, and I hope you'll listen. And I hope we'll move beyond this phase where we talk about the house being on fire. Because, look, once you get over that, we can start doing some work on this. We can start actually dealing with this issue that we've been avoiding for so long. The house is on fire is just a way to get your attention. That's all. I love you all.